Plenty of county finals, semi-finals, the whole lot coming this weekend, Michael Verney. Where else to start only the Kilkenny Hurling final between Ballyhale Shamrocks and Dixborough. I would imagine most people would lean towards Ballyhale and think they'll do the three in a row here, but the most recent team to win it outside of Ballyhale are Dixborough, and their form has been very, very impressive coming into this, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. Just on this weekend, I think this is the busiest weekend in terms of finals of the whole club scene. I think this is the most kind of concentrated one in terms of football and hurling finals, and probably the Kilkenny one is it's definitely the pick of the hurling finals. Anyway, really, really intriguing game. Ballyhale who were going for obviously three in a row. As you said, Dixborough, the last team to win it, didn't beat Ballyhale along the way. And then when they did meet the year after, Ballyhale beat them in a quarter final. But both have come through. Like I'd say, the Shamrocks were probably delighted, and even hearing TJ Reid talking after about this is the first hard game they've gotten in. The guts of probably about 6 weeks since they were beaten by O'Loughlin's in the group stages. They kind of coasted past a lot of teams. Obviously, pasted the Roar and pasted Clara as well. This was a game where a lot of things went wrong against the Village, and they still managed to pull through. I look back at the game again the other night, and they actually went 17 minutes without scoring, which is actually hard to believe. It's, you wouldn't think it's credible to say that, but having been 2-8 to 6 points up, they didn't score for another 17 minutes, including injury time, and they still managed to win the game. And really looking back on it, it was even more influential than I thought, just how big Colin Fennelly and TJ Reid were for them, and they carried them over the line. I wonder, can Ballyhale be that bad again? Can the other lads contribute that little, as little as they did the last day? Find it hard to believe. They have a 2-week turnaround as well, and I think they'll realise that they got away with one. I think to me, the Village were the better side, but Ballyhale still came through.
Yeah, but isn't it kind of a common theme with Ballyhale that one of these leaders that they have, and they've an unbelievable spine. Like I did a piece with Owen Murphy on our game.ie there, the Kilkenny goalkeeper. Have a look at it and see what his thoughts. But he's just talking about the spine of the team. If Joey Holden doesn't step up, then Richie Reid at centre back will. If TJ Reid doesn't, then of course maybe Colin Fennelly will. And this is all without Adrian Mullen, who isn't available either. But they just have so many different lads on different lines of the field. Like, we haven't even talked about Paddy Mullen, Darren Mullen, Evan Shefflin. They just have key players all over the place. Owen Reid, who came up big with the goal late on against Tullaroan and was also flying against Danesford. There's always somebody who's going to step up at some stage. Like, it's very rare. Like you said, they went 17 minutes without getting a score against James Stephens. But it's very rare that throughout the entirety of a game that there's a complete collapse, because there's just too many leaders. And that's going to be Dixborough's problem. Like, they have some really good players, but they don't have guys who have driven Kilkenny regularly for years. Yeah, Killian Buckley, but not as many. So I think that's where ultimately people will lean towards Shamrocks, because there's so much you can depend on.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to, outside of Colin Fennelly and TJ, Ronan Corcoran was good at midfield, and Owen Cody chipped in with a couple of points, but there was so many lads way quieter than they normally would be. Darren Mullen was under pressure from Luke Scanlon. Interesting to see whether Darren Mullen picks up Bill Sheehan. I think that's a big kind of a question for the Shamrocks. I don't necessarily think Darren Mullen is suited to that kind of man-marking job. I think he's more of a hurler. I think he's out around wing back and setting up attacks. He's brilliant on the ball. And then it's an interesting debate. Owen Goff is full forward for Dixborough. He's probably not going to hurt the Shamrocks too much on the scoreboard. He's more of a worker and maybe slipping ball out to lads. Will they consider putting Joey Holden out to the corner on Bill Sheehan to try and tie him down? Very hard to see Dixborough winning the game if Bill Sheehan is tied down. So that's kind of an interesting thing.
But they want Joey Holden minding the square. I mean, in general, you kind of want your fullback, the lad you can depend on, the county man. You want him minding the square, because it'd be ideal for Dixborough to drag him away from the square and then try and figure out some other sort of mismatch in closer to the goal. Because let's be fair, if there's one thing Dixborough have, it's depth and a good spread of quality players.
Yeah, see, it's interesting from Dixborough's point of view. They'd just be hoping to cancel out Joey Holden. They'll hope if Owen Goff just is in around the edge of the square, roams around, takes him away maybe from that danger area a couple of times, and maybe limits his possessions to 3 or 4 in the game, that'll be job well done. But there's a kind of a conundrum there to see. They don't want Bill Sheehan going to town either. Luke Scanlon and Owen Gilfoyle for the Village, they won a serious amount of frees. And even Paddy Mullen's discipline the last day, he was very, very lucky to stay on the field as long as he did. He obviously got his martial arts at the very end. but for persistent fouling, he easily could have gone with 10 minutes to go. And Dixborough are going to do the same as what the Village did. They're going to take them on and put them on the back foot. They've got a lot of pace in the forward line, and Shamrocks didn't like being ran at the other day. They're usually all heads up and they're all facing forward. Richie Reid was kept out of the game. Joey Holden was kept out of that game as well. I find it hard to believe. I just think that, do you know when you think a team got away with one, like probably in the football, East Kerry probably got away with one in their quarter-final game where they got 1-1 near the end, and they've kind of got through to the final, relatively easy since. I think the opportunity to beat them was the last day, and the Village threw everything at them. And Dixborough will throw an awful lot at them too. And they have a good defence, but I'm just not sure if they're going to have enough in attack. Like, they have a lot coming off the bench. The 5 lads that played the 17 final coming in off the bench. I haven't listed here somewhere yet. So they've Conor Donnellan, Nick Fagan, Oisin Goff, Martin Gaffney and Robbie Murphy. But outside of Bill Sheehan and Shane Stapleton, your namesake, they're not necessarily lighting it up, apart from Aidan Nolan, and it's a big question mark about whether he plays. There's talks that he could have punctured his lung in the semi-final, and that he's a big doubt for the final, but it's kind of been kept quiet over the last couple of days, so I'm not sure. I kind of follow that fairly closely. Boro have the backs. I'm just not sure if they have the same kind of dangers in attack, particularly their starting attack, to really hurt the Shamrocks.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the punctured lung. I saw an update in American football, and there was a tweet put out by Adam Schefter, the journalist. The Chargers team doctor accidentally punctured his own quarterback, Tyrod Taylor's lung just before kickoff Sunday while trying to administer a pain-killing injection to the quarterback's cracked rib. Isn't that something else? It's one thing losing it in battle or picking up an injury in battle. But for that to happen because a team doctor messes up, that's a terror. Yeah. But do you know, my namesake Shane Stapleton, as you mentioned him, he obviously is from St. Pat's in Palmerstown, moved down to Kilkenny. He's actually on the Kilkenny football panel, believe it or not. And you know, as well as that, so he's from Palmerstown. The place where the home pitch is in Dixborough is in a place called Palmerstown, believe it or not. So there you go. He's a really good player. I mean, you'd have to say for Dixborough, they were impressive against O'Loughlin Gales, always had them at arm's length, put up a nice score, put up a huge score against Bennett's Bridge before that. So I mean, it comes back to the whole thing. If you can manage to run at Ballyhale, maybe there'll be some weaknesses there. Teams so very rarely get a chance to do that. But to be fair, like, even though they're not pockmarked with like star inter-county forwards, we had there is that quality, and you've listed out a lot of them: Bill Sheehan, Shane Stapleton, and so on. I mean, at least they have a good spread of forwards that should be able to test the Ballyhale backs. But it's still just hard to imagine that they'll put up the tally required. I mean, the Village threw Everton at Shamrocks, put up a decent score. But it's like, even if Dixborough put up, what will they need to put up here really to win? 220, 225?
Yeah, anything between 220, 125. I'd say they need to put up 27 to 28 points to win this game. I would imagine, because you can see Ballyhale hitting 25 points anyway, definitely.
Well, that's the thing, yeah, because they've so many ways to hurt you. Like, they can obviously play it through the hands, and I remember in the county final last year, TJ Reid was running through with a ball, or maybe it was against St. Martin's in the Leinster quarter final, and he just does a stick pass 20 yards straight to, I think, maybe Colin Fennelly or one of the Codys, and they knock it in. But of course, you can go long ball on him, on Colin Fennelly, on plenty of them. So they've just so many ways to hurt you.
And just really interesting as well, Owen O'Shea really caused Killian Buckley trouble the other day. He played out in a kind of a deep line centre forward role and roamed around. Buckley is an auxiliary sweeper for the Borough. He plays across the 45 usually, and everything goes through him. But it'll be interesting to see what they'll do with TJ. Like, he cannot afford to sit back. Can't afford to sit back on TJ, because he'd absolutely destroyed him. I don't
think Ollie Walsh is necessarily suited to him, and I don't think they want to have Killian Buckley. Maybe they will say, Killian Buckley, you man mark him, and now we're going to put Ollie Walsh as the sweeper, because he does have very good use of the ball. He's a great puck and he's a very tasty hurler.
Maybe so, but that's a fair shift in tactics, in that they'll only be playing with 5 forwards then, essentially. Now they have mobile forwards.
Well, Ollie Walsh has been wing back, like, so. Yeah, well, look, I mean, maybe that is it. Maybe they will have to play with a sweeper for once. Maybe we're going to have to change it because it is Ballyhale.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Colin Fennelly as well. Like, in fairness to the Village, Shane Donnellan was full back for the Village, and he attacked everything. But there was just some good ball going into Fennelly there at different stages, and he was just able to take advantage. And even you mentioned about TJ. TJ snapped the ball at one stage. Keane Kenny and Conor Brown were given a load of cover to the Village defence. Then all of a sudden, one of them was caught up the pitch. Actually, I think both of them were caught up the pitch. The puck out was boomed down straight away by Dean Mason. TJ caught it. No sooner than he turned 20 yards to Fennelly sidestep back in the net, and it brought them back into the game. I just can't see. That many. Ballyhale had too many good players for 4 or 5 more lads not to be stepping up, for Joey Holden to be having a game, or Richie Reid, or Owen Cody, or Brian Cody. Evan Shefflin had a very, very poor game the last day. Whether he'll start or not is probably in question at the moment, but if he does start, or if he comes in, you'd imagine he'll have more of an impact. And I think it's an interesting game though, because there's an awful lot of different questions that we're asking there. Ballyhale, I think, will have to be ahead. I think they'll have to be 5 or 6 ahead, because I think the Boro will have an awful lot of impetus off the bench. But I just can't go away from the Shamrocks. I can't get away from the fact that I think they've had their scare and they've managed to come through it. TJ looked a fierce relieved man after the game the last day, and he said that's what we needed, that's what we wanted. It's brought them back down to earth. They've had 2 weeks to get back at it on the training pitch. They've no football or anything like that annoying them, and I just think I just think they'll come through it.
Yeah, I mean, like, the reason that I'm leaning towards Shamrocks is obviously because of their quality and their double All-Ireland champions, but also, like, I know I've said this a few times, but it's just always in the back of my mind that they lost last year. I know it was the wind and the rain and all that, but to lose a quarter-final and score 1-8 to 1-6, I thought that was very disappointing. We played them in a challenge match, as we have the last couple of years, in a challenge match earlier in the year, and when Quick Ball was able to go into, obviously Conor O'Callaghan's a very good player, goes into him and Mark Shuda, they were able to cause them all sorts of trouble. Then I'm thinking Colin Fennelly and TJ Reid, if you get enough ball into them, they can do something similar. So I just see more opportunities for Ballyhale to get a big score here. So I'm just about going to go with them. But I do think Dixborough will give them a very, very good game. And it's not beyond the realms of possibility for them to win this. But, I mean, how do you go against Ballyhale? It's just so hard to.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to say that the Village had going for them and that the Borough have going for them as well is that they're seriously fit side. Like, they will stay running, and they have the bench, so they won't be flagging at the end of the game. There's something nagging in me saying that Dixborough could do it, but when you put all the facts out on the table, I just think Ballyhale will have too much firepower up front, and I think lads that maybe didn't chip in the last day, Owen Reid I think felt the weight of the ball maybe twice the last day, got 1 score, he could have a game. If other lads chip in and the burden isn't as heavy on TJ and Colin Fennelly, I think they win.
Yeah. The Clare Hurling final is on this weekend as well. O'Callaghan Mills against 6 Mile Bridge Sunday at 3 o'clock down in Cusack Park. This is a battle of near neighbours and you'd imagine fairly strong rivals. Nobody really expected O'Callaghan Mills to be involved in this. I mean, this time last year I think they were playing in a relegation battle and just about got through that. So that's a fairly tasty turnaround in a short enough period of time. Do you reckon that they can give a fair rattle to 6 Mile Bridge, who've been collecting plenty of titles in recent years?
There's kind of a flip on the Kilkenny decider. So Ballyhale did were in poor form, showed loads of really, really good form. Still played well, but got a fright. The Bridge have kind of stuttered along. They're not playing particularly well. They're doing kind of what they have to do. It's probably set up for a bit of an ambush from O'Callaghan's Mills. Like, they will probably be very, very confident going in. Nobody kind of thought that they would be in the final, being honest with you. Nobody thought they'd probably be in the semi-final. Everybody was looking at a Ballyhale kind of Bridge final, the game maybe that we haven't got to see over the last couple of years. They seriously upset that. You know, you were chatting to Colin Ryan there, and he was saying they have a full bill of health. They're playing very well. There's a lot to be said for a side that's playing very, very well going into a final. You're trading off 6 Mile Bridge's experience and obviously what Davy and Saoirse Bulford and Tim Crawl bring to the table and the experienced players that they have, not playing that well against a side, maybe an unheralded side that are playing really well. Sometimes, like, it's a trade-off. Like, are you going for the form team or are you going for the experienced team? And I think this one is tricky-ish.
Yeah, you can't ignore the fact that 6 Mile Bridge have quality all over the field, and we always talk about Shane Golden, Jamie Shanahan, Alex Morey, who'll hit the frees as well, Shane Amori. they just have quality pretty much everywhere, and that's going to be tough for O'Callaghan's Mills to shut down. But like in beating Ballyhale 217 to 117, albeit without Gary Brennan, that was obviously going to be a huge blow for Ballyhale. I mean, that's really impressive. Jacob Lecnan, he scored 8. Colin Crehan, he scored 1-4. Conor Henry a goal. Brian Donnellan, Aidan O'Gorman chipped in. Gary Cooney scored a point. I mean, I've seen him with the minors in the past couple of years. Diminutive forward, really, really good. Patrick Donnellan stepped up. He got a point. And it's so interesting to see the 2013 All-Ireland captain hero against the 2013 All-Ireland manager hero. So that's a lovely little subplot. And you'd love to know, is there any sort of... is there anything going on in the background there? Have they sort of had a nod and a wink? Have they bumped into each other in recent times? The parishes aren't too far away, you wouldn't know. But Tim Crowe...
There's a funny one there on Pat Donnellan as well, because Pat Donnellan, I think I have it right, Pat Donnellan played a year at least of Fitzgibbon in LIT, but he was taking a year, he wasn't going to play Fitzgibbon 1 year because he'd holidays booked, or he was going to be away around the time of it, or whatever. And Davy, and I think it was Saoirse Bulfin was saying to me, actually, they convinced him to play, but he still had the holiday booked, and they played the whole way up and ended up in the final, and I think he missed it, or something along those lines anyway. And I think he never thought that he'd be Clare captain as a result of that, or that there'd be some little lingering thing. But Davy obviously forgot about that, and he was Clare captain after. But yeah, it's interesting. They're intrinsically linked. Like Davy's best moment probably in GA management anyway, Pat Donnellan was the captain that day and leading kind of Clare forward. So there's little interesting things going on in the background. I thought it was interesting as well. Davy famously, obviously him and Tim Crowe, they've kind of both been open enough about it. They didn't get on for a long time and were kind of brought together last year, and it's a kind of a dream ticket there in 6 Mile Bridge. But Tim Crowe, obviously father of Marie, the sports journalist who everyone knows obviously from the radio and just from the papers in general, he seems to be very kind of a cute fella. Derek Lynch had a quote with the Clare champion the weekend, and obviously the Bridge are like reigning champions going into this against an unheralded side who only came up from intermediate a couple of years ago. And Derek just said, Tim Crowe is one of the great gentlemen of Clare sport. This is a direct quote. I cannot understand how the Bridge are favourites on Sunday, was one of his first comments when we spoke for this week's Clare champion final, ahead of the Clare Senior Hurling Championship final piece. A gent but a cute old fox at the same time. I have to say, I love that kind of stuff, because it's very rare you hear that now about a match. It's very rare you'd hear a player saying on the flip side, I think we'll win, I think we're flying it, I think we're in great form, I think we're better than them, or something like that. It's very, like, that's the raw honesty that if me and you were talking about a match, we might say to each other. We're probably not going to say it about Coola or Boro live on a video feed here, but and he's kind of gone the opposite way, where he's playing the poor mouth.
Yeah, he's sort of trying to sell us a pup there, and it makes me think of an old saying, don't piss on my back and tell me it's raining, Tim. But yeah, I know they have to be favourites here. Like even in the semi-final there, they didn't exactly shoot the lights out against Aero, getting 17 points and holding them to 113. Obviously, it's going to be tough enough for teams to score against them. I think Broadford found it tough as well. I don't think goals have been coming easy for 6 Mile Bridge. You know, Alex Morey came up with 10 frees the last day, nothing from play. Brian Corrie and Jamie Shanahan, they got a few scores. Carl Malone is another very important player for them as well. You mentioned Patrick Donnellan. Yeah, I actually did a piece with him on our game. Type his name into the search bar there and you'll find it, where he was talking all about that incident with Davy and also his entire Clare career. So if you're going to call this though, it's hard not to go with the team that's kind of been there and done it before. O'Callaghan's Mills probably have the slightly better form, but when you're coming into a final, you haven't none of the players involved have done it. It's been a big long famine. They're not used to county final day. It's hard not to just lean with the team that have done it, much like as we were saying with Ballyhale.
Yeah, it could be a bit like how many teams are beaten in a final before they get a chance to get over the line either the next year or a couple of years later. It's going to be different. It mightn't be as overall of a kind of a scenario or a situation, because there's no Tulla Pipe band this year. There's not going to be much of a crowd in there at all. But it's still a county final. It's still unknown to them. Whereas 6 Mile Bridge are old hands at this stage, and you'd have to favour them.
Can I throw a point at you that Conor McKeown from the Irish Independent Herald made to me on the preview of the Dublin football final? If you're interested in that, Ballymun against Ballyboden, check that out as well. But he made the point that there aren't as many periods of sustained momentum shifts or sustained momentum in games, because he feels that the crowds aren't there. Now, you've played plenty of games. You're going to be involved with Boro this weekend, but you know when you're out in the field and a goal is scored and then a point, and all of a sudden the crowd is up, and then maybe if you're on the right end of it, you're like, okay, we have these lads under pressure now. Or if you're on the wrong side of it, you're kind of, there might be a little bit of fear. Some lads might go inside their shell. Do you feel that that's a factor now that, and I mean this could be important for O'Callaghan's Mills in their first final, that panic stations mightn't set in quite as quickly because you don't have the crowd getting on top of one team or the other?
I would totally agree with that, definitely. Particularly, I was thinking of that when Kilkenny were playing last weekend, and it looked like same old in the opening half. 3 goals went in, but they were able to kind of react really, really well, get a point down the far end. They were hitting a lot of wides themselves, though, and you know that noise when a team keeps hitting wides, and the crowd is just like, it's almost, you can almost hear people shaking their heads, and it's like, oh no, not again. And it feeds in. No, 100% it feeds in. So I think it has a massive effect. I don't think a goal is as much of a big deal now in a way. I genuinely don't, because the noise and everything associated with it, it's just, there's no great panic about it. The keeper gets to hit out the ball. The delays as well between a goal going in and the ball being restarted, I think, is a lot shorter. No more than the half-time break is a lot shorter now. No one's in dressing rooms. I think the momentum is not as big of a deal now, and I think for a team going playing their first county final, I think it's definitely an advantage, I would have to say, because if they're 5 down and they miss a free in front of the goals, you're not going to have this whole panic thing. So I do think it definitely would favour a team coming in with little experience. The situation or the occasion should not be as daunting maybe as it would be.
Yeah, well, and this one now, whether you want to say it's of benefit to O'Callaghan Mills or to 6 Mile Bridge, even just the lack of noise means that you can actually get a message onto the field an awful lot easier. That you don't have the crowd drowning you out. And I'm sure you know this from playing in packed houses at times. If there's 5,000 or 10,000 people there, you might be roaring at a player who's 20 yards in front of you, trying to, let's say you're wing back and they're wing forward, saying, come back and protect me here from the puck, or whatever it might be, and they can't hear you, even though they're only 20 yards away and you're screaming at the top of your lungs. That sort of stuff is taken out of play as well. And you just don't know how that will manifest itself.
When things are going bad and there's a load of noise and lads stop communicating with each other because they're only thinking about their own job, because there's so much noise and it's almost hard to concentrate on anything else. That kind of goes out of the equation as well. So I think when teams are going well, it's harder to, how should we say, maximise that dominance. And when teams are going bad, I think it's easier to turn it around.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in agreement there. So the Cork semi-finals are on this weekend, and we could be heading to a bit of a traditional final if Glen Rovers and Blackrock get through, because Glen Rovers have 27 titles and the Rockies are top with 32. So the semi-final lineup this weekend is Blackrock against UCC, and then the other one you're looking at Glen Rovers, who'll be, I'd say, fairly heavy favourites against Erin's Own. But we'll start off with the Blackrock game, and in their quarter-final win over the last day against Douglas, they were impressive there. Michael O'Halloran, who had been injured, he's a county panellist, people would have seen him, great athlete and obviously excellent hurler to go with it. He scored 7 points from play. Shane O'Keefe got 2 in the second half, he's a good ball winner. Alan Connolly got the goal. And they're a team that are flying at underage level, but they haven't won it since 2002, despite being a superpower. As I said, they've the most titles in history. They've lost finals in 2003 and in 2017, but they'd won 3 of 4 before 2003. They really did fall off the map, so it would be huge for them to get back into a final, but it's going to be a fair task against a star-studded UCC team.
Yeah, they haven't won one, just actually thinking, because I remember Alan Brown and John Brown winning one in 2002, and they haven't won one since those guys probably departed the scene. Obviously, both would have been regulars enough with Cork at the time. Really interesting game here, because you obviously have, the most successful club in Cork hurling against, people do forget that UCC is a club. It's a GA club. They're a college, but they are also a GA club, no more than anything else. So there is a fair old team spirit there as well. They haven't won one. You were just actually saying they haven't won a county final since 1999. UCC haven't, and that was when Joe Dean led the line and was probably in his pomp at the time. They haven't actually won it since 1970, when another man was leading the line in the forward line, the great Ray Cummins. But they're obviously in serious form at the moment. They're back-to-back Fitzgibbon Cup champions. Cork kind of legend Tom Kenny at the helm. And when you go down through their team, it's a fairly star-studded team. Just going down through some of them here: Killian O'Dwyer, obviously from Killinall and Tip, who's on the Tip panel. Paddy Goodell from JK Bracken's wing back. Paddy O'Loughlin, Kilmallock centre back. Mark Coleman from Blarney and Cork, obviously wing back. Then you have Shane Conway, obviously probably the best Kerry hurler nearly of all time, I'd say at this stage in the forward line. And of the subs coming on, then just lads that I know, like Mark Keogh coming on as well. Mark Keogh, who's on the tip panel too, and they've been coming on for Liam Sheedy's side in big games last year. They lost Neil Montgomery. He didn't obviously play the quarter final, but he played the day against Inmokilly. He got injured on club duty with Ballyhale last week. But when you go down through, like, there's a fair smattering of county players there, all lads that are of a good age as well. It's going to be interesting. Mark Coleman, they're all busy. Like, he's going to be busy with Blarney this weekend too, and there could be a couple of other lads that are busy. Shane Barrett obviously is Blarney too. There's other guys. Pádraig Power is Blarney too. So whether those three guys will be able to play with UCC and go at full steam is another story. Like, it must be difficult. No more than I was chatting to Sean O'Sullivan there from Kerry about the divisional sides in Kerry. You don't know who you're going to have from year to year with teams going up and down. And I'd say, like, Tom Kenny doesn't know who he's going to have from day to day. So it's really, really interesting. I'm sure he's trying to coax club managers and even coax players at times. But when they have everybody that they should have, they're a formidable outfit. We don't know, and I'd say Tom Kenny doesn't even know at this stage who he's going to have yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, I would imagine that Glen Rovers would rather see Blackrock get through here, because you know the way they don't particularly want Inmokilly in the Cork Championship. No doubt that they probably don't want a college in there as well that can, you know, pick tip panelists Paddy Cadell, Paddy O'Loughlin from Limerick and Mark Keogh from Tipperary. I mean, the fact that they can just pluck like inter-county lads who've been there for a couple of years, who've been playing regularly in the league in the last year or so, I'd say they definitely don't want to see them late in the championship, or if they do, they'd be very happy to beat them. So that's the first semi-final. The other one, Glen Rovers against Erin's Own. I think this is a repeat of the 2016 final, which Glen Rovers won. Erin's Own beat Sarsfields, I think, against the Head in their quarter final, and 3 points from Robbie O'Flynn, the county panellist. His pace to burn, that was crucial. Owen Murphy, he got a load of frees as well. So they're looking to reach a 6th senior county final. They won 3 of them, 1992, 06 and 07. Now they'd have plenty of experienced players and a number who would have won those county titles, like Shea Bowen, Shane Murphy, Stephen Cronin, Morris O'Carroll, the Murphy brothers, Owen and Kieran Hero. So the thing about them is they showed a bit of bottle in the group stages, because they were behind against Bishopstown and won. They were behind against Newtown Chandram and won. So they've shown a nice bit of mettle, but still they're against the Glen Rovers team that are looking to win. I think they're looking for, do you know what? It's the 100th year anniversary of Christy Ring, and it's coming up close to the actual date itself. It's sometime in October. They have his image on their jersey. I'd say they'd be very, very happy to win a county title in his century anniversary. Richie Keller is in his 6th year there. He has 2 titles, and I'd say he'd be happy enough to add a 3rd.
Definitely, yeah. You had an interesting quote as well, because they played a lot of group games. He said, actually, Richie Keller, the manager, said, this is our first knockout game since we played Borrisalee in the Munster Club back in February. So it's it definitely wasn't back in February, but it's back before Christmas last year. So it's very much having to take the chance you're getting. It will be a month next Saturday since our last competitive game. We played Kerry in a challenge, but we were short, and so were they, so you could not read anything into that. We talked about this in Limerick, where the 2 teams that topped the group were almost like sitting ducks in the semi-final because they've been waiting. So they're
same in Mayo football. In Mayo football, the 2 teams that had got through top lost to the teams that they'd beaten in the group stages in the quarter final.
Can easily happen, and by all accounts from what Richie Keller is saying there, they played a challenge game and prepared, I'm sure, as well as they can. But it's hard kind of beat playing championship games like Erin's Own have. Erin's Own are really, really dogged side. They're not going to put up a massive score, but if they can keep Patrick Horgan relatively quiet and turn it into a 16 scores to 15, that type of a game, a low score and kind of a tight game, they'll give themselves every chance. You would imagine that with Simon Kennefick and Pat Horgan and a few others, that they're just going to have the Glen and just have a bit too much firepower. But I wouldn't put anything past Erin's Own. They're the sort of team, like if you were backing in this game, you'd hate to be backing against them because they're kind of all heart and they will take the opposition into the trenches. I just think they'll probably be a score or two short, and I just don't know if they have the same kind of firepower as the Glen would have up front, and I'd see the Glen go through.
Yeah, as well, like even Patrick Horgan on the frees alone, and Simon Kennefick, who you mentioned, like we saw them on TV against St. Finbarrs in the first group game, and they were fairly insatiable. I'm going to go with Glen Rovers to win this and win it by 5 or 6 at least. I don't think they'll be in too much bother throughout this game. But by the same token, I think Aaron's Own will give it everything. The Offaly semi-finals this weekend, so obviously you were involved, so we don't want to twist you too hard for information. That would be very, very unfair. But that's Belmont against Kilcormac Killahee and Boro against St. Rynagh's. So for really interesting subplot for the Belmont against Kilcormac Killahee. Belmont are managed by Trevor Fletcher, Ross Grayman, who scored a goal for Kilcormac Killahee in the All-Ireland final in 2013, and he's now managing against Kilcormac Killahee. That'd be fairly excruciating, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's happened to them a couple of times. They ran Kilcormac to win a point in a semi-final a couple of years ago, and they've Belmont have been the nearly side. They've been beaten by the subsequent champions in semi-finals by a score, a point on 2 occasions, and I think 3 points last year for the last 3 years. Like they're thereabouts. Won an under 21A a couple of years ago as well. Probably the names that we'd all know, the likes of Oisin Kelly and David Nally, they'd all be kicking football with Forban as well, which is the football side of the club. They were beaten obviously in an epic penalty shootout by Tullamore last weekend after extra time too, which isn't ideal. So that was Sunday evening, and this game is going to be played on Saturday, which gives them 6 days. So it's tricky enough. Like they were probably literally just coming to training on Tuesday or Wednesday just to recover and get ready for this weekend again. So they have a good few boys who will be playing dual. In fairness, Kilcormac would have a fair whack of lads playing dual too. I think they played last Friday night in intermediate football. Would have a good few lads. I know Conor Matton is definitely playing, Stephen Leonard and a couple of more. So they actually booked their place in an intermediate final. And funnily enough, they booked their place in the intermediate final against St. Rynagh's, who they could possibly end up meeting in an intermediate football final and a senior hurling final. But really, really interesting. That Belmont Kilcormac game is really interesting. I'd say this is probably Trevor Fletcher's last stand with Belmont. He's done really, really well with them, but he'll really, really want to get over the line and get them to a final. And they'll probably feel that if they did get to a final, that they'd have a lot of momentum bringing that with them. The monkey would be off the back and that they have a great chance of winning it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other semi-final, Boro against Rynagh's. So it's a repeat of last year's final when, of course, you were a nice few points ahead and Rynagh's made a late charge. I think scored maybe 7 points late on to overtake you, maybe in the last quarter, something like that. Ken Hogan in charge of Rynagh's, who, of course, he led Boro to the 1992 All-Ireland Club Final. Joseph O'Connor, he's suspended after being sent off against Shinrone in the final group game, so that could have an impact too. So another tight game, and no doubt there'll be skin and hair flying.
Yeah, sure. 2 interesting games. The Kilcormac game is in Boro on Saturday, and our game is in Tullamore on Sunday. As you say, obviously the memories of last year's final will be never too far away. Boro and Rynagh's is a great rivalry though. Like there's hatred and all there, particularly on the pitch, but it'd be quite a healthy rivalry off the pitch. Would have met so many times down through the years. The funny thing about it, I'd say it would have been some crack in the 90s in particular, because Brian Whelan actually won his first medal with St. Rynagh's. He actually started off in school. I think he won his first medal with St. Rynagh's school. His father Padjo would have been living out there. They moved into Boro. Brian is now recognised as one of the greatest hurlers of all time, Boro's finest hurler, Offaly's finest hurler, the Millennium Man. But he easily could have been playing with Rynagh's if they hadn't moved. And then Padjo, I think Padjo has double figures senior championship medals with Rynagh's as a player. Then he comes in and manages Boro to 3 All-Ireland titles. And funnily enough, the other All-Ireland title in 95, Pádraig Horn was the manager. So for the 4 All-Ireland titles that Boro have won, you've had St. Rhinus men at the helm for each of the four of them. So it's mad, and out in Banner they'd always say like that the Wheelitons should have been, it's a joke now, it's obviously so long later, the Wheelitons should have been playing with Banner, or that they should have had them, and that golden period should have been happening in Rhinus rather than Boro. But it's going to be an interesting game, really, really tight game.
Yeah, you can say it all you like, but there's nowhere to cash that in. We'll go into the Armagh final then, Cuchulainn against Middletown na Fianna. So Middletown, they beat Derry News 3-19 to 2-12 in the semi-final. A couple of second half goals from Ryan Gaffney. And Derry News had been well on top with 10 unanswered points from the likes of the Gaffney brothers, Dean and Ryan. Marty Mohan and Nathan Curry just put Middletown ahead. Cuchulainn's then, they beat Sean Tracy's 2-20 to 2-6. Cuchulainn's were well up on the break, and they coasted in the second half. So the second semi-final in Galway is on this weekend. We already know that Turlockmore are going to be there after beating Loughrea 2-17 to 1-17. Who they will face is now the big one. St. Thomas's had a COVID case last weekend, so this game was put back a week. Now I think that hasn't interrupted their training. They've been able to continue on. So St. Thomas's against Capitagle. We kind of previewed it last week, but we might as well have a refresher on it here. With that forward line that St. Thomas's have, everyone from 8 to 15, I've done a preview with David Connors at the Tuam Hurling, everyone from 8 to 15 has played at minor grade or higher level for Galway, so it's going to be very hard to keep them down.
It is, and I think there's a lot. It's funny, it's not like a team going for 3 in a row, you'd say maybe hunger might be an issue, but after losing heavily to Ballyhale in the All-Ireland final the year before last, and losing to Bursalee then last year in the All-Ireland semi-final, they look absolutely hell-bent on 3 in a row. And as you said, there's just too much scoring power. Like, some amount of lads are going to have an off day for Thomas's not to win this. Between Conor Cooney, Éanna Burke, David Burke at midfield, Shane Cooney at centre back, Fintan Burke at full back, and there's a sprinkling of lads that have played nearly all levels with Galway, particularly across their forward line. And I just think Capitagle are a good side, and they were beaten a score in the last 2 semi-finals by Lee Mellows. I don't know. I think they've missed their chance. They're gonna have to beat a big dog. So the opportunity is there before them, but I'm just not sure if they're as good as they were a couple of years ago. And I see Thomas is getting through by a handful here. It's just there's such a star-studded lineup, and I just think they have a motivation. There's in no way any complacency within their camp. And I see Thomas is coming through with a few to spare here.
Yeah, there had been talk of a bit of a lack of pace in the full back line for St. Thomas's, but you'd assume that Fintan Burke has remedied that to some situation or to some degree. Capitagle would be a very well set up team, but they're going to need goals, and I think the Mannion brothers, Donnellan and Jad, they're going to be the ones that are going to need to have a big day there. Maybe get 2 or 3 goals. I think you'd imagine that's what they're going to need to get a win here. And Damien Joyce is probably going to have a game of games in the back line as well. I think he'll probably be sweeping in front of the full back line. So everything has to go right.
And everything has to go right for them, and a lot of things have to go wrong for Thomas's. And when you have that many lads, kind of like with Ballyhale, when you have that many lads that can do it for you on a given day, like Conor Cooney scored 2 points the last day and 6 frees. He could easily score 1-4. Éanna Burke got 6 the last day. He could easily repeat that, or he could be quiet and 2 or 3 other lads could pick it up. I think it was Oisin Flannery got 1-1 the last day as well. David Burke chipped in with 3 points from midfield when they beat Kilkenny Daly fairly handsomely enough. Maybe they only beat them by 4, I think, on the scoreboard. Were well up. And the likes of James Skettle in goals, like he's probably not going to have to concede. They're not going to concede a goal to win. And Jan Mannion's probably going to have to really, really cause them a lot of trouble up the far end. But no, it's Thomas's for me.
You'll probably have to see him play there for a few games. But I was talking with David Connors about this. The idea of Fintan Burke, who's now full back for St. Thomas's, if he starts to excel there, do you think Shane O'Neill would gamble on putting him full back in the championship and saying to Dahi Burke, we need you further out the field, whether that's half back or midfield? Or do you think he'd need a full league to play there before he'd chance it, like Gerard McInerney played there during the league earlier in the year?
Yeah, I'd be of the opinion, and I taught this the whole way through, that managers will go with what they know. And I don't think they'll take a chance, because it's like throwing a young lad in, for a championship, for a knockout championship game that hasn't played before. You're not sure what you're going to get. You nearly always go with the experienced player because you know what you're going to get from him. Like Fintan Burke could he could be a brilliant fullback for Galway in years to come. I personally think he could be a better wing back, because I think he could dominate a game from wing back. I think Shane O'Neill will go what he knows. If I was involved, that's what I'd be doing. But maybe they have different ideas there. Maybe they'll say, okay, Dottie Burke has been playing midfield with Turlock. We'll leave him midfield. Fair enough, he hasn't played there for County, but he's been playing there for the last 3 months. Fintan Burke has been playing full-back for Thomas's. We'll leave him there. Shane Cooney has been playing centre-back for Thomas's. We'll leave him there. Now, he's one guy that they have got to see at centre-back with a couple of league games. So it'll be interesting, but I would think that they'll go what they know.
Okay, we'll move on to the Laois semi-finals this weekend. Rathdowney Earl are going to face Borris Kilcotton, and Rosenallis are against Clock Ballacalla. But just a couple of the results involving these teams from a couple of weeks ago. Rathdowney Earl beat Abbey Leaks 225-17. Clock Ballacalla had a handy win over Castletown 426-11. And Rosenallis, who have been the surprise specialists in this year's championship, they saw off Borris Kilcotton 212-113. So starting off with Rathdowney Earl against Borris Kilcotton, the fact that Mark Kavanagh, who had scored 115, went off late in stoppage time for Rathdowney Earl, seemed to pick up a serious enough looking shoulder or arm injury. We'll see if he's available or not. If he's not playing, that's a massive blow to not only miss somebody who can kind of run the game from centre forward, who has the pace, but also a free taker. That could be huge.
Yeah, it'd be a massive loss. They probably have Ross King as a kind of ready-made replacement as a free taker, but Mark Kavanagh's loss would be huge. He's a great line ball taker as well, and a great link player as well. If he can't get shots away himself, there'd be good ball going into the full forward line. We don't know as of yet whether he's fit to start or not. But that, like, his role would probably kind of swing the game. This is obviously a repeat of last year's final. Rathdowney are defending champions, beat Borris Kilcotton handsomely enough last year. I think it was 17 points to 1-9, but always kind of had them at arm's length. But a lot will come down to whether Mark Kavanagh is fit or not. Obviously, on the Borris Kilcotton side, you probably have Brian Butch Stapleton and Matt Whelan in the heart of the defence, and you'd have Aaron Dunphy and PJ Scully be hitting the frees for Borris. I'd probably still be favouring Rathdowney. We've played Rathdowney a lot down through the years, and they always seem to be one of these teams. They're not just playing with 15 or 16. They always have a very, very good squad. So even if Mark Kavanagh is missing, as I said, I think they have a ready-made replacement kind of free taker in Ross King, and like Patrick Purcell, and even like Joe Campion and a few more. Like they're a strong side. Jack Kelly too. They're a very, very strong side. They're kind of strong all over, and I'd be favouring Rathdowney to come through again.
Yeah, and on the other side, do you think Rosenallis can keep this going? I mean, John O'Loughlin getting or transferring to the club this year has obviously been big. County panelist, I think Paddy Keaton, he's on the freeze. John Maher's been playing very well in defence. So can they keep it going?
Yeah, I think they can, to be honest with you. They've beaten two of the top four already. And if I was to put the top four in a pecking order, you'd have Rathdowney up the top, Camross closely by, then Borris Kilcotton, and then Clock Ballacalla. So to me, I think like having beaten Camross and basically dumped Camross out of the championship, and then beating Borris Kilcotton, I think that's outstanding form coming into this game. Rosenallis are a real kind of success story. So I think it was 4 years ago they won both junior competitions, so hurling and football in the 1 year, and then last year they won both intermediate competitions. And as you say, they've beaten two of the big four already. I think John O'Loughlin coming to Rosenallis is his father's club, obviously, and said he was keen to kind of give something back to the club, and even though he would have played with Mount Mellick originally growing up, he was keen to give something back to his father's club, who he started off his journey with. I think Rosenallis have a great show here. Clock Ballacalla, obviously we know, like Willie Hyland, Picky Marr, and a couple of more players that we know fairly well from county duty. But Rosenallis have two brilliant results behind them, and as you said, Paddy Keaton, John Maher, John O'Loughlin, they have a load of young fellas too. They've been successful enough at underage, and they have that kind of winning mentality now. And they've caused two shocks as well. Like having beaten Camross, you would have wondered, will they be able to back this up? They backed it up in a tight game against Borris Kilcotton. This is a knockout game. They're actually safe in the senior football. They won a relegation semi-final. Don't know, was it last week or the week before? So they're safe in that. All attentions have just been on hurling. And yeah, I think Rosenallis might do it.
Yeah, I mean for Laois manager Eddie Brennan, he's a mile behind a couple of the rival counties in Leinster in terms of preparation. Semi-final stage coming this weekend, obviously a final after that as well. Whereas Matty Kenny, now he knows what he has. Like the Dublin final was last Sunday. and obviously most other teams were knocked out before that. He would have seen who has impressed him at this stage. Like James Madden was very good for Ballyboden in the final. He kind of did as well on Con O'Callaghan as anyone really does. Wexford, they're obviously finished a month at this stage. So for Eddie Brennan, it really is catch up. It's probably nerve jangling stuff watching these games and seeing the likes of Mark Kavanagh go off injured.
Oh, I'd say so, yeah. Like the lockdown, I was open enough when the lockdown came in Offaly. I was actually happy because I was injured at the time and it gave me a chance to get back. But then you're looking at the flip side and you're thinking Eddie Brennan, Nick Fenley, and even like Jack O'Connor in Kildare and David Herity in Kildare as well, the two managers there, they've been put back really under pressure now. So like Laois semi-finals this weekend, there's still a good few lads playing football. I think it's, as far as I know, it's still another fortnight until the Laois Hurling final. So it's coming right up on, like, he'll be lucky if he has 2 to 3 weeks with his players. And then, as I said to someone last week, who was I saying to last week? I was chatting to someone and I was saying about the pubs being back open, like, there's nothing stopping lads celebrating now. It was actually, it was a county manager, it was Mickey Graham. I said the Cavan final, I said, he's under pressure up there with players coming back. And I said, you're probably not happy to see the pubs open up again. I said, like, when boys win or lose, they're going to be on a bit of a session for a couple of days, and he's kind of laughing or whatever, because if the pubs weren't open, it might just be the Sunday night and maybe a bit on Monday and you'd have them back. But it leaves a lot of managers under a lot of pressure, yeah. And Eddie's probably the one. I think the hardest thing for him to get around in his head is when he's looking at it and seeing, okay, Dublin is over. Matty Kenny has all his lads tunnel vision, and he doesn't even know who he's going to have. He said he doesn't know whether he's going to have a Mark Kavanagh or whether other guys are going to pick up knocks over the coming weeks. And you just don't know. Like a hamstring injury in a Laois semi-final could rule you out of the guts of the championship. So he's no idea what he's planning for. And I think in situations like this is a classic case of having loads of replacement players, having a development squad, seeing the bigger picture, not just looking after the 20 that you have and the regular starters. It's looking after the lads that I might need at some stage, and it's kind of having that sort of an ethos around a camp and a culture around a camp. And by all accounts, I think they have that in Laois, but they're still going to be under pressure. They're really, really hamstrung with regards to time.
I'd be curious to hear from viewers in either code if county players on their club team over the last couple of months have been wearing those sort of GPS trackers, those sort of vest bra type things that have the monitors in them. Because I've seen the cooler players, they have them. I'd imagine most county teams do. I mean, certainly county teams that can afford to have them would have them. How much of an impact is that going to make? How much of a disadvantage is a county that can't afford them are they at? So that sort of stuff in terms of what are county teams trying to do to make sure that their players are ready, that they've the fitness work done. Because, like, think about it this way. If you're a county manager and you've got lads playing with good clubs at the top level, you're probably... in terms of, you'd rather have your players, but at least you feel like they're going to get trained well to a high level, so when I get them, I won't have too much work to do to bring them up to the elite standard that I want them at. But if you're in a county where the club championship isn't quite as strong, or where a couple of your players are with weak teams that prepare like, a junior team or prepare like a club from the 90s, you're going to be thinking, how am I going to get them ready for inter-county standard in the space of a few weeks?
No, it's very true, yeah. Mickey Graham did say to me, actually, when I was chatting last week as well, he said that he said a lot of lads were coming back in very, very happy, and they were coming in having played games and in a kind of a rich vein of form, which is obviously a positive thing. There's no big 2 month or 3 month pre-season waiting for a Walsh Cup game or waiting for a Dr. McKenna Cup game or whatever. He also said an interesting one, and I wondered, like, we saw Gary Syce is back on the Galway football panel at 36. I wonder, will there be many lads that will rock in from club action straight back into county? Like, I think it makes an awful lot of sense, I have to say, because there's no, like, if they come through the club campaign unscathed, like, there's no big kind of, pre-season or anything like that. They're going to be nearly going straight into games, and I think obviously the standard of pitches they're going to be playing on is going to be very, very high, but still going to be wintry conditions. I still think there's room for some boys to maybe make U-turns on retirements and just play. This is a one-off county season, and I think there'll be calls made for lads to be coming back in. Mickey Graham said as well he made 5 or 6 calls, and lads absolutely jumped at the opportunity to come back or even just come in for the first time, whereas he said they would have thought about it before. And he kind of said that the idea of, okay, we're just going in for training for a month and we're playing matches is very, very appealing to lads, whereas signing up for, October, November, December, January, and training for 4 months before you play your first game is not appealing. So that's going to be interesting to see over the next while.
So the Meath semi-finals are on this weekend. Trimmer against Kildalkey and Rathota against Nafina. So Rathota going for the double, the football champions. Kildalkey won it last year. Roscommon final is on this weekend at League against Pádraig Pearses. So at League were champions in 2018 and Pádraig Pearses the year before in 2017. The Sligo final is on as well.
Yeah, Sligo final is Naomh and Eastkey, two new names on the block. It's a repeat of last year's final, but before that, Naomh, that was their first county final win last year, and Eastkey haven't won one since 1962/63. So it's the two new kids on the block there. The Wicklow final very, very interesting too. Bray Emmets against Carnew. Bray be heavy enough favourites going into it. Managed by Paul Cardy, as we said a couple of weeks ago, the former Wexford player, Glen Barrington clubman, who was also over Danesfort and had to make that fairly quick dash from Callan to Auckland for a game there a couple of weeks ago. Bray have a good mix of youth and experience. They'd have the likes of John Henderson, obviously son of John Henderson that used to play with Kilkenny, Christy Morehouse, who would have been captain with Wicklow a couple of years ago, Pádraig Doyle and Owen McCormack. They have a lot of firepower up front, and while Carnew were also young, they'd have Enda Donoghue, Jack Doyle, Martin O'Brien, they'd all have lots of Wicklow experience. They try and pack their defence and try and keep games tight like they did against Greystones in the semi-final. I think it was 14 points to 1-9. They shut out Greystones. They're quite heavily relying on Enda Donoghue and his frees, and I just think Bray will have too much firepower up front. I just don't see how they might shut down one or two of the Bray lads. They might shut down Pádraig Doyle or Owen McCormack, but Christy Morehouse will step up, and vice versa. And I just don't think Carnew will have the firepower up front.
What about the lock of the week? So this is our weekly segment giving you the best GAA tips. Take it away there, Michael.
Well, I tell you what, Shane, after Rose and Alice winning their 2 games, I think they were 4-1 outsiders to win each of those 2 games against Camross and against Boris Kilcotton. And I have to say, I'm very, very surprised that they're 11-4 with Boyle Sports this week to beat Clough-Ballacalla. Now, fair enough, Clough-Ballacalla have won county titles in recent memory, but Rose and Alice have massive, massive form coming into this. They said their football campaign is done with. They have beaten 2 of the top 4 already. As I said, I think Clough-Ballacalla would have been the weakest of that top 4 coming into it. Obviously, Camross are gone now, but I think Rose and Alice are an outstanding price going into that game. 11-4. I think that's a really, really juicy price to get stuck into. I thought there'd be something more like 5-4 or 6-4. I thought it'd be very, very close. They're my lock of the week, and I also have a little accumulator for this week as well. So cannot see Thomas has been beaten. Thomas's are 4-11 to beat Capitagal. 6 Mile Bridge are 4-11 to lift the trophy, so that takes the draw out of the equation. I think they'll get the job done, even if it is after extra time. I definitely think they'll get the job done, and put that in a treble with Tullamore at 11-10 in the Offaly Senior Hurling Championship semi-final against Drumcullen. Just think Tullamore with Shane Dooley, and Shane Kelly's an injury doubt going into the game. I just think they'll have a bit too much attack and prowess up front. Drumcullen had a great win against Kinnity, but I just think Tullamore will have a bit much up front. So lock of the week, Rose and Alice 11-4, and a treble of Tullamore, 6 Mile Bridge to lift the trophy, and St Thomas's in Galway.
That'll do. The old lock of the week keeps going strong. Right, thanks very much, Michael Verney. We'll chat again.
Cheers, Shane. Good man.